tunes for us tonight too, which is kind of cool. So I may throw those into the music list for the evening. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I'm actually just tweeting out that the show's live and that you can tune in now. But yeah, I'm like really excited to be here, especially this is like our last week before a bevy of new content comes in.
Yep.
And I know that people have really enjoyed in the past when we did the reviews of every episode. Like we'd go an episode and you and I would make extensive notes, and then we'd come in and letter grade it, and we'd give our ups and our downs, our roses and thorns.
Ooh, I like how you snuck the roses and thorns in there. Nice.
Yeah. You know, I'm doing my little artwork, and but I will say that like this is a real special week because it's that anticipation.
It is.
I will also say somewhere around 22 years ago, I was watching Phantom Menace for maybe the like 9th time. And then about 19 years ago or 20 years ago, I guess it is 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I was watching Attack of the Clones the 2nd or 3rd time about now, and then I maybe right about this time in 2005, I was trying to get on the radio to talk about the Revenge of the Sith. So this is like a Star Wars week. Like every week for the last 40 years, there's been something going on.
Dude, it is wild to think that it's been that long. It really is.
Yeah.
It is surreal. That, or at least that long since these things have come out. Sorry, turn down the volume of the music just a little bit. It's got a little loud there. I know it is wild that we're even here, that we're finally getting this series, and I don't want to spoil. I've got something I wanted to throw out there that's been talked about in the news recently. We'll get into that in the show, but yeah, I'm just so excited. I was like compiling all these notes and things to remember. How did I remember this character of the last, almost 40 years? Because we both started watching Star Wars when we were super young, so like not quite 40 years for me, but 35, 36 years of my life. Like it's when I think I was 6 years old the first time I saw what we now call A New Hope. So like it's most of my life, and like the fact that we're finally getting this series, and like I don't think it could have happened any other way. Like sure, it could have actually happened, but
yeah, I'm actually really excited, and Rich is on, so I'll make my first Star Trek reference of the night. I feel like Star Trek's been a benefit of this, in that you now get some really cool opportunities to bring in people that through digital series, things that may not have worked as a movie, but definitely work as an online bingeable TV series. So yeah, I'm really excited because I don't think in any other time Disney would have been like, you know what, we're gonna do a standalone Kenobi movie, especially after what happened with Solo. Like they're not gonna do standalone movies like that anymore. So yeah, I think that's the beauty of this, is that we get like a really cool Kenobi story.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, shall we? We've got a lot to talk about, so shall we just dive into it?
Let's get to it.
Let's do this.
Punch it.
We're here. And just so anybody's curious, yeah, anybody who hasn't, I don't know if you've watched the show before or not, I'm in a shed in my backyard, and it's Northern California. It's been pretty warm today. So my shed door is open because it's just like I'm in an 8x10 shed, so it's like steamy over the last few hours. I'm like, we were Ryan and I were talking in the pre-show, like both of my doors were open. I actually had the AC going with the doors open just to sort of like it was bad.
If you're not in Northern California right now, you might not know that what Jeff is saying is an understatement as to how warm it is outside. We are right up to about 100 degrees today. At least in Sacramento, that's how it was. It was hot. It was, oh darn, do I have black interior in my car hot? Yeah. My kids were running from the car to the house as if it was raining. So yeah, it was a hot day today.
I guess I shouldn't complain because it only peaked at about 87 here in the East Bay. it's still more than like I was outside for a little while, like sitting in the backyard this
It's
evening
hot.
after work and like having just a beverage and like I'll hang out for a little bit. After about 15 minutes, my wife and I were talking. She's like, "I'm not sitting out here anymore. You can come inside with me, or you can just stay out here by yourself. I'm going inside."
I have my Star Wars dad jokes right here. You know, it's Tatooine, kind of Jakku, not Mustafar yet. We're like 3 weeks away from that, and then it just gets miserable. Like, please, you know, find your. It's funny how quickly like kiddie pools disappear in Northern California around this time because everyone's just like, oh my gosh, it's too hot. There's going to be some type of TikTok kiddie pool challenge. I'm certain that's about to pop up. So.
Probably the ice bucket challenge becomes a very different thing. Now I have a moth, so that's going to be a thing. Great. Now I have a moth like right here on my screen flopping around. Great. It's probably going to fly into my face at some point during the show. Maybe that was a bad idea to open my door. Oh well. Well, at least it's entertaining. Oh, he's just going to town on my lights. Well, I have these two big LED panels up here that are my lights, and I got this 49-inch widescreen. You probably just saw him fly by. Huh. That's going to be fun. Okay. Anyway.
It's a picture. It's a window, Jeff, into... Look, you could be streaming tuning in from anywhere in the world right now.
I mean, it's basically a TARDIS. We're just mixing our references everywhere. I'm basically in a TARDIS, and like you just have no idea. You can't see outside, so you have no idea where I actually am.
Bigger on the inside.
Yes. So much bigger. Well, thanks everyone for joining tonight. We are on our road to Kenobi, and we're almost over next week. I actually did take next Friday off because, I mean, I'm going to have to just watch the show like a billion times. And it's a 2 hour, almost 2 hour like intro episode. So I'm taking the day. And just to celebrate, we were talking this before, I bought new shirts. So this is my new, I think it's called from results.com. This is a Star Wars shirt. All these are little lightsabers with little like, it's all like architecture plans for like Star Wars. I think it's like engine parts and manifest parts and all this. Like it's all like blueprints and stuff. It's super cool. I got my son one too, and I'm so jazzed. He came home for school sick today though, so he was laying on the couch, and I'm like, "Hey, buddy, I got you a shirt too," and he's like, "That's cool." that was all I got.
Well, still, I think it's awesome. I love that shirt. I actually went right when you came in. I was like, "Oh, that's a really cool shirt," and I like how it's like casual cosplay. Because totally. It's like, you know, it just like works in, you know, you can wear that to work. Everyone's going to be like, oh, that's a cool shirt. And then it's like, you see, it's like,
and they're like, are you wearing a Star Wars shirt? And I'm like, did you really have to ask that question? Like, anybody who knows me at this point pretty much knows if you think it might be a Star Wars shirt, it's because it probably is. It's just, that's just the thing. Well, everyone, thank you. Like, so Road to Kenobi, almost over. We're almost there. Just real quick before we get started for the night, subscribe. If you haven't subscribed please do that. Hit that big clicky thing on the screen and the thumbs ups and all the other jazz that people are supposed to say as YouTubers. We'd really appreciate it. It helps us out a lot. And yeah, we love making this content, and we want to have more engagement from everybody else. So yeah, it's next week, and what we thought we would do tonight is spend a bit of time talking about all that content, whatever it happens to be, whatever medium it's been delivered in for the last 35, 40 years, maybe longer. Maybe longer? No, not longer. 35, 40 years. I'm going to just say that. My math is terrible. The things that you could consume that would give you a better idea of who Obi-Wan Kenobi is, who he's been, how people have envisioned him, everything. Whether it be legends, current canon, it doesn't matter because, at least in my opinion, every part of how we've learned about Obi-Wan, whether we consider it legends or not at this point, does contribute to who we see Obi-Wan Kenobi as now and who we're going to see him as next week. So even if we're not touching legends, yes, you may not, but Filoni and Jon Favreau and everybody else is influenced by that content because they probably did consume it and they read it, and that has influenced their view on the character. And likely we're going to see elements of that show up next week. So tonight we are going to go through kind of our top list of things to go read and watch and all that happy jazz before next week, so you can get yourself ready to watch Obi-Wan Kenobi next week.
Yes. I'm really excited about this. I wonder how much both, because Jeff and I made our lists independently, and I wonder how much we might talk about movies. I will say that I found an obscure reference that is definitely in Legends, but has always kind of fit with my idea of who Obi-Wan is. I was sharing this with Jeff before the show started. back in the 1970s, when there wasn't that much Star Wars content that was available, and the movies had just come out, and Marvel Comics had optioned Star Wars and had built all of these comics, and actually did a comic version of the whole movie. You can actually find the entire movie as a original Marvel comic from 1977, and they actually, I think, used the shooting script. So there's things in that movie that in that comic book that are actually like retconned by Empire. It's hilarious. But one of the cool things is that after the movie came out, Marvel was like, oh, we'll keep writing Star Wars stories. And so then they did like Splinter of the Mind's Eye. They had all these like crazy Han Solo adventures. Giant green bunnies are involved. It's hilarious. But they did an entire comic book run on this Obi-Wan on a intergalactic cruise. And it's a young Obi-Wan, and he's kind of a Poirot type. I just realized and I feel stupid, Jeff, that I didn't realize it until this very second. It's Murder on the Orient Express. I just realized that's what it is. It's Murder on the Orient Express. I was about to say, yeah, he's got to solve a murder, and it's very difficult for him because it's like, you know, everybody's kind of a suspect, and then I'm like, oh man, it's Murder on the Orient Express. But what's great about it is the Obi-Wan character to me was always a bit of like kind of a loner. Alec Guinness kind of plays him very highbrow, but he almost has this aura about him, like he's got some type of secret knowledge, that he's separate from everyone else. And that's how he's portrayed in this comic book series. And he's a detective. And I always kind of liked that idea of Obi-Wan, that he's this like really smart, very astute, but very aloof person that he can't fit in normal society. That's why he's a hermit out in like the desert. That's when I was a kid. That's what I used to think about it. That Obi-Wan was that kind of like, he was better by himself anyway. That was my idea of Obi-Wan. And so I always liked that comic book because the reason what made him such a great detective, which again, this is what makes Poirot such a good detective in Agatha Christie mysteries, is because the Obi-Wan character is like an observer of humanity. He's separate from humanity. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I thought, I like that. And that's what I thought they were trying to do in Attack of the Clones. Because Obi-Wan goes off and does his own detective story, goes to a local Mel's Diner, talks to a cook who sends him to Camino, and then he keeps, and he's always like on the case. I liked that idea in Attack of the Clones, and I liked that idea in this comic book run, because the thing I always thought about Obi-Wan was he doesn't fit in with the rest of us. And that's kind of what I think is a fun thing, if you can find it, and it's actually available in the Star Wars Omnibus, or if you want to see Obi-Wan as a detective, you could see it in Attack of the Clones. But I like that concept for the character because he is so separate. Mm-hmm. From what we see in the trailer, he's separate and alone, and what we see in the movies, he's separated from everyone and alone.
I love that. And actually, it echoes a book that I was going to recommend here in a second too. That essentially shows Kenobi the same way. In this book, actually, I'll just throw it up. So this is the Kenobi book. It's the Legends Kenobi book. So John Jackson Miller. I forget when this one was exactly published. I'll have to double check. Or when it was originally published, I should say. But in this, it looks like I think he developed this in 2006, that time frame. Anyway, in the book, Kenobi's basically just got to Tatooine. He's trying to set up a homestead in an old building, a home that no one's kind of someone abandoned. He's trying to set up a homestead, and he ends up interacting with some people, and he's trying really hard not to. But it reminds me a lot of what you're describing, where he's kind of like, he's trying to stay on the outside. He's kind of by himself. He's like that wanderer, what have you. But he can't help but getting involved. And actually, I love, even though this is, man, I know Joanna's watching. Joanna, you can see it right there at the top. They've even published them, marking them as legends on the books that are legends. So pre-Disney purchasing of Lucasfilm is legends in their rind. Really just for the books and comics, because the movies are all canon. They're made by Lucas or produced by Lucas, so they're out there. But it's really
except
books.
maybe the holiday special, and
This isn't the
Caravan of
holiday
Courage.
special you're looking for.
Caravan of Courage. If you want to see a real weird movie, go watch Caravan of Courage. Where the Ewoks.
If you have Disney Plus, you go watch that. It's on there, and it's a thing. That was the movie I remembered as a kid, and I had no idea it was a Star Wars related movie until like a year or two ago. No joke. When I got Disney Plus, and I'm like, wait, what is that? Why is that showing? I'm like, oh my god, those are Ewoks. Oh my gosh, like that's what this was. I couldn't remember. I was such a little kid that when I would watch it that I couldn't make the connection, and I never thought about it again. And then of course as an adult I'm like, oh my god, those are the same thing. Anyway,
it's one of the great disappointments of my life, Jeff. Like I was a kid in second grade, and the teacher was like, "We're gonna watch a special movie. We're gonna watch Star Wars," and I was like, "Really?" And they were like, "Yeah," and they put
Caravan
it on
of Courage. You're like, oh, hold on, I have it.
Yeah, it was so disappointing.
It was just like it was literally like I don't know if you can actually have a sad trombone in school, but that was basically what it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, so in this book, something I didn't realize until just now is it echoes what we've heard in the Kenobi trailer. Literally, when what is the character's name? The main Inquisitor that everyone's talking about. I can't. Which sister she is? I can't think of her name.
Is it the second sister or is it the third sister? Because
whoever's in the trailer, who's ever the main person in the trailer that we're seeing, and who's been on the Vanity Fair tour. I can't remember which one she is.
That's third. That's the third sister.
Third sister of the Inquisitors.
I think I'm right about that because
So she makes a comment, something to the effect of, or someone makes a comment that he can't help it. He can't help it. It's in his nature, like to be the Jedi, to be like a do-gooder, basically, from the Inquisitorius' perspective. And I love this book because it outlines that exactly. Like no matter what he tries to do, even to stay out of it, he can't help but get involved because that's who he is. Like even when he knows he shouldn't, and he knows he cannot be a part of this, he can't just stand idly by and watch people get hurt. Even if he doesn't draw his lightsaber, he just can't do it. So if you get a chance, drop again the name of the book you were talking about.
Oh yeah, so you can actually find the story that I'm talking about, and you can find a really cool collection of pre like Disney canon. It's all legend stuff now, and in fact, you can actually find the original copies of this in your local comic book store. But if you go to Amazon, or if you have a Marvel account or anywhere else, just look for Star Wars Omnibus 1. And that is a collection of all of the comic books that ran, I think, from 1977 through 1979. And it's comic book adaptations of some of the great, like, forgotten tales of Star Wars. But again, like, Alec Guinness plays Obi-Wan in A New Hope as if he's kind of like a scamp, like a roguish kind of, again, it's very Alec Guinness. Like, watch any Alec Guinness movie, and Obi-Wan fits in the Alec Guinness canon of who he is.
Yeah.
Like, and so he's very scampish. It's very much a rogue, but he's like Hercule Poirot. He's a guy that like can't help but get involved. Like to your point, he's solving a murder, and it's like he doesn't even want to be there. And he's like, gosh, now I gotta solve a murder. But because he's a Jedi, and because the Jedi were described as the guardians of peace and justice, when the Marvel Comics were trying to write a young Obi-Wan story, they just kind of thought of Obi-Wan as an intergalactic police person. And, someone who had authority to solve crimes. And it's a really cool. He's dressed all in black, because apparently police in a galaxy far, far away are also dressed in black.
Because of course.
No other color.
Nope, no other color. No, it has to be that. Okay, so there's two for everyone. I'll drop my book here into the chat. I put the Omnibus in the chat for everyone watching, so if you're curious what Ryan was talking about, it's right there. And I know I'm linking Amazon because it was the easiest thing to find, but absolutely prefer, if you can, find these at like a local comic book shop, a secondhand store, go to like a Half Price Books. Any of those other places too would be fantastic options as well. Amazon, just so you can get an idea of what we're actually talking about. Ryan, so what's your next recommendation?
Okay, so my next recommendation is it's also a bit of an obscure find, and it's not to discount the larger Clone Wars series, and we've talked about this in the past. But it is the Getty Tartarovsky. I'm probably
Tartakovsky or something like
butchering.
that. Yeah.
Thank you, butchering the name. He did Samurai Jack. It's the same animation style as Samurai Jack and Dexter's Laboratory, and it is amazing. It is a small multi-part series it's split over 2 seasons. The first season is 10 episodes, and it's all 2-minute episodes. And then the second season is 5 10-minute episodes. And so altogether, you end up watching like maybe, I don't know, about an hour and 15 minutes or hour and 20 minutes of content. But it is a storyline that is that it's great. And it tells Obi-Wan and Anakin during the Clone Wars. And the first part of the story is almost immediately after Attack of the Clones. And so you see a young Anakin and a young Obi-Wan. And the thing that I like about this series is the young Anakin and the young Obi-Wan in the first season of this, and again, they're all 2-minute episodes. It's super easy to watch, 2-minute episodes. They still have this like kind of antagonistic relationship. It's older brother, like 15-year older brother to younger brother, you know? Yeah. It's like, you're reckless. But what's great is you see Obi-Wan in the character that they tried to position him as in the prequels, which is as more of a deliberative thinker, a negotiator, someone who's trying to find alternatives or different pathways. He has to fight a bounty hunter. There's an army of IG units that they have to fight. It is really, really cool, and you get to see Obi-Wan and Anakin, and they're kind of like Obi-Wan trying to guide Anakin being a hothead, getting in way over his head almost immediately, and then coming to Obi-Wan and saying, I was wrong. So that happens in the first season. And then in the second season, and I'm not trying to spoil it, I'm just trying to like inspire you if you have not seen this. And in the second season, you actually see a different Obi-Wan and Anakin relationship. And this is where now they're older and they have a greater amount of trust with each other. And you see them as brothers. You see them as, and in fact, in the first episode, that's exactly what happens. Anakin is still mad at Obi-Wan, and then Anakin is promoted to become a Jedi Knight. And I'm not even going to spoil how that happens. It's amazing. But then immediately you can see how when they are then both knights, Anakin and Obi-Wan together, there's mutual respect. And then the two of them have these amazing exchanges in dialogue. And then you see the Spock and McCoy of it all. You see the logical Obi-Wan and the emotional Anakin, and how the two of them together create a whole person. Mm-hmm. And you even see Anakin taking risks that Obi-Wan says, that was really smart. And then you see Anakin trying to deal with a decision and going to Obi-Wan for advice. And again, that's the type of dynamic that I think we all wanted to see in the prequel. And that's the type of dynamic that I think makes the tragedy of Anakin's fall and Obi-Wan's failure as a mentor and friend what is going to make this show so great. So again, it's really simple. It's animation, and I get it. That's not everybody's cup of tea. It's called Star Wars Clone Wars, not the Clone Wars. And if you can look up Star Wars Clone Wars Getty, Geddy, because that's the animator that put it together. But it is some of my favorite Star Wars, and it is really easy to watch. And you also get some really cool stories of things that are happening elsewhere. Like, all the stories are great, but I think you get a lot of good background for Anakin and Obi-Wan.
I have an obscure reference. I just learned about it. Would you say their relationship in that is more of like in the first season is like a Gilgamesh and Enkidu?
Oh, snap! Yes! Wow! Wow.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night. Thanks. That's all I got.
That is a deep reference.
Mm-hmm.
They are very much like and I'm gonna actually reference a thing that references that story. It's very much a Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra for anyone who watches who knows what I'm talking about and points to whoever does. Picard has to retell that story about Gilgamesh. But yeah, like the thing that is great about the Anakin Obi-Wan dynamic is Obi-Wan's sense of guilt over not being able to not just help his friend, but this child that he helped raise. It's funny how they keep making all these familial connections. And Jeff, you probably can remember in Attack of the Clones, Anakin says, "You're the closest thing I have to a father." And Obi-Wan then keeps saying, "You're like my brother." And I always keep thinking, you guys need to like work out your family relationships because a brother relationship is different than
Dad,
a father
two
relationship.
very different things.
Yeah, like it's very different. I'm your best friend. No, it doesn't work. You guys need to like sort it out.
You can't be a parent and best friends. That's not how that works.
Exactly. That's where failure happens as a parent. But my point is that the great version of that we see is in The Last Jedi, where Luke is dealing with that failure as a mentor to Kylo Ren. And he is carrying the actions of Kylo Ren as the faults of himself. And that's great. And that's also that whole, I need to separate myself now. I have to go into exile because that's my punishment. And it's the way to keep everybody else safe. That's what Obi-Wan's doing, and that's what I think makes this show really interesting. I could care less about a lot of other certain characters, although I would be totally down for an exclusive R2 show. If it was a show just about R2 going on adventures, doing cool things, mixing drinks, delivering them, that's all I need. But Obi-Wan, like, the show is interesting because of his complicated past with Anakin. And this animated show does a great job at showing the relationship. It's not a fall unless you can see how high they were up. And this small animation shows how much trust they had, how much love and respect they had. Now it's a fall. Yeah. Now it's devastating.
It really is a good series. If you haven't watched it, and for everyone listening right now, if you have Disney Plus, as of March of 2021, you can watch the Genndy Tartakovsky's Clone Wars on Disney Plus, but I think you could probably even find them on YouTube and other places too. So yeah, to Ryan's point, definitely go watch them. Even the first season is really entertaining to begin with, and you learn a lot about their dynamic. But yeah, I agree with you. The second season is, I don't want to say it's more impactful, but it tells a more relevant story in the lead up to the Kenobi series next week, I think.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, Ghost Hand, Nelvon Warriors, the Mother's Whale. I mean, I love when people come up with stuff like that. It's just great legends. It's like, that was well written, all of it.
I think you know what that you actually just made me think of, a little tangent, is I sent you this TikTok I think a few weeks back, and I'll bring it up again because it was awesome. It was somebody, the creator basically said, he was responding to a comment or stitching a video, and he said, "I love Star Wars nonsense." And I'm like, what do you, I'm like, my first reaction was to be like defensive, like, wait, dude, what do you mean nonsense? And then he said, but let me explain. I don't mean nonsense in like a denigration sort of way, like putting things down, not like, oh, this is utter nonsense. Of course it is in sci-fi or science fantasy. But what he meant is like these bits of nonsense that make it interesting, that tell you there's like a backstory to everything, but you don't need to know it. You just need to know that there is something else. And the example that he used was the scene from the Solo movie when they're flying, and he says something to Woody Harrelson, and he says something like, "They're on us like a Gingerson's pelt," and he's like, "I don't know what that means. They're on us like a like," and he said he has two Russians, and finally Solo's like all quiet. He goes, "Well, are they on us or not?" And he's like, "Yes, they're on us." But he makes these two statements. That any viewer doesn't get. But there's a fourth wall sort of not breaking, but like bumping up against when Eldon Aldrich's character as Solo says like, What are you talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about." And it serves, I like it because it served kind of two purposes for that character, but it's what you're referring to. It's these bits of nonsense for his character serve the purpose of like just being funny, but also kind of like showing the backstory, but it also served a purpose of like showing that Solo is not the well-versed traveler he likes to talk about as a kid. It's not till later that he is. But I like the idea of that nonsense, these things that don't really matter in the grander scheme of things. But when you hear them, they're like, wait, but what is that? What does that mean? Well, you're never going to find out. There's nothing we're going to tell you about that. Just know that it refers to something that gives you the sense that the world building has actually happened in this story. There is a world outside of the thing you're viewing right now. You may not ever learn what it is, but there is one. And so even if it's subconscious or subtle when they say it, it makes you as a viewer feel like there's more to this. I don't necessarily need to know it, but there is more here. It's not just the two-dimensional thing I see on the screen. There's more to the story going on. And I really loved that. I'll find it and post it someplace, but I love that TikTok. It was like, I never heard the word nonsense used in such a positive way before, and it made me feel really good. I liked it.
No, it's world building. It's like Clone Wars. Like, the reference to Clone Wars is just dropped casually in Star Wars, in the original Star Wars. And Luke just says, oh, you fought in the Clone Wars? And that's little bits of that, and it's like no one even had the background. I remember when I was a kid, people used to say, "Oh, Obi-Wan's a clone." Obi-Wan. There was probably an Obi-2, Obi-3, Obi-4, and I thought that was like silly when I was a kid. But people made up a legend for what those things were because it just helped to build out the world and flesh it out.
Yeah, well, that world building out a world makes you feel like you could be a part of it. When a story no matter how interesting it is, feels superficial because there's nothing behind it, it's hard as people to get into the story. And I don't want to put down any particular books. I don't want to make anybody feel like reading something is bad or good or what have you. But I felt this way, and this is just opinion alert. I don't have an opinion alert thing to go on the screen, but opinion alert. The book The Alchemist. I've had it recommended to me over the many, many years. And I've never wanted to pick it up because I just didn't know anything about it. But one day we were at the library and my son was looking at some stuff and I found it on a shelf. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll read some of this. And I got some number of pages into it. And I'm like, this just feels like it's leading into a self-help book. And I don't know anything more than that. I stopped, so I don't know much more than that. But I will say that I just realized that I think the reason why I had a hard time is there's nothing behind it. There's just this linear story being told about one character, but any interaction the character has, at least for the first bit of time in the book, there's no behind it. There's just the linear interactions the character has. It's very clearly leading you to a conclusion to teach you a very particular lesson. So for that purpose, I'm sure it's fantastic at that. But from a story perspective, I was reading it like a story because I didn't know. And I get some period of time into it, I'm like, this is the least interesting story I have ever read because there's nothing here. There's just this one person doing one thing and that's all. I'm like, that's not a story. That's a tale. And that's fine. But anyway, it made me realize that just now that when you don't have those little bits of call them nonsense or whatever that subtly tell you that there is a world behind the thing that you are reading, it's really difficult to get into the story as a story. Not a parable, but a story that's just being told for the sake of a story. It's really difficult to get into that. But I'm glad you brought up the Clone Wars because the reference I was going to make, or two references, but one I'll start with is in the Clone Wars, I was going to jump straight to the Mortis arc, but instead of doing that, I actually want to go to there's an episode, I believe, in the short miniseries they did, I think it's in season 1, where they're searching for Jabba the Hutt's son. And it's Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka. Ahsoka has to do some stuff, and it moves around a bit. And there's a scene in there where Obi-Wan confronts Ventress for one of the first times, at least that we see. I don't think it's the first time, but it's one of the first times. And they confront each other, and they're dueling throughout this big temple tower, huge open space, and they're dueling. But the banter between the two of them, I've rewatched that episode so many times because she very much talks to him. They're like viciously flirting with each other. Like it's not flirting that's going to come to a positive outcome. It's that if it concludes the way that not Obi-Wan, but the way that Ventress hopes, Obi-Wan will be a little bit unlived at that point. So it's not really, it's a different kind of flirting. It's a little sadomasochistic, so to speak. But I love the interaction because the rest of the Clone Wars, that happens near the beginning of the whole series. When we watch the rest of the Clone Wars and hear things about the great, the negotiator, and we hear that term used for Obi-Wan, and we see his character as sort of like this serious, that sort of dry sense of humor, but he's always kind of being a bit witty, but he's being subtle about his wit. You see that come out in this duel with Ventress, where even though you watch him, he's not really trying that hard in his fight with her. She clearly is, but he's not. He still sort of like plays around the edges and dances. And I think that's a really interesting corollary to the last time we saw Obi-Wan, because even though he was intense with this fight with Anakin, he's never, especially when it comes to fighting, he never fully commits to a fight. And I think that's really telling about the character, is that he wants to help, but fighting is just not something he ever wants to do. It's not part of his genes. It's not part of the person he is. And I love that episode specifically for that particular scene, because it's so fun to watch the two very different types of personalities connect, yet also butt heads. And I don't want to say like there's some sort of attraction there, because that would diminish the entire thing. But that idea of like opposites attract, I don't mean in a romantic way, but opposites attract. It's interesting to think about it from that perspective when you watch the two of them, because it's almost like they do actually want to be engaged with each other more frequently, like these verbal sparring while they're dueling, what have you, because it's fun to watch. They're good at it. There's a relationship there, but it would never be more than antagonistic ever. You could tell that right away.
I always like those. Again, sword fighting is a great way to get two characters real close to each other and allow them to talk to each other. That's actually the thing that I didn't like about episode 1, is that they didn't talk to each other. Like I liked that Dooku when he, especially in episode 2, fights with Obi-Wan and Anakin, and he's like goading them on, and even Yoda, he's goading them on, and surely you could do better. And even when he says to Anakin, who Hayden Christensen, God bless him, that must have been really hard to step into a role that big when you're such a young actor.
And with somebody like Christopher Lee, jeez.
Yeah, exactly. But he did have one really great solid line delivery, and it's Dooku and him are about to get into a fight, and he says, I would have thought you would have learned your lesson. And he said, I am a slow learner. I love that line. I love the delivery of it. I love how it's great. The scene that you're talking about with Obi-Wan and Ventress is one of those scenes where it's like, it's great because you can have your antagonist and a protagonist literally dueling, and then having a war of words as well, because they're in the same space, they're in the same location, they can fight it out. That's what makes the sword fighting great. That's what makes the swashbuckling movies great, which is where all that stuff comes from.
Good old like Errol Flynn and things like that. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yep. Like it gives them a chance to be able to fight, or the Robin Hood movies for the same measure. I should let you know I'm the
Princess Bride. Or the Princess Bride. Exactly. Oh my God. I mean,
Princess Bride. Exactly. Yeah. I should tell you, I'm not left-handed. So
I have practiced my Agrippa.
Yes, exactly. I completely agree with you there. Like I'm gonna start quoting lines from Princess Bride. Welcome to Princess Bride chat.
Sorry, Rich. We're going down another path now.
We can 100% do that. I'm not gonna lie. I love that movie. It's so great. But yeah, I was just gonna say that you're absolutely right. I think that a thing that's missing from the movies that they're going to try to suss out of the upcoming Kenobi show is Kenobi as a Kenobi as a reserved player, as someone who is moving pieces along, but is doesn't overcommit the way that Anakin does. Mm-hmm. That is someone who's also ready to go to kind of like a war of words.
It's interesting that you describe him that way, because I'm thinking now about some of the, and I know we're trying to stick with the ways to get yourself prepped for Kenobi, but I want to take this little rabbit hole for a second. I'm a huge High Republic fan, so I've been reading all of the High Republic stuff, and something I've noticed about a lot of the Jedi, Stellan Gios, or Elzar Man, both of them, those are actually two really good examples of this. I would say male human examples of this. There's other Jedi that are varying examples, but we'll say the two of them, because one of them is very much Anakin-like, and one's very Obi-Wan-like, but not in their commitment to the Force. So in these two characters, they're both highly committed to the Force, and they're highly committed Jedi. But one of them is, I would say, one of them is kind of like a blend of, almost a blend of Anakin and, why am I blanking on his name? Quinlan Voss. So like that kind of a blend where Quinlan isn't as brash and over arrogant as Anakin is, or I should say, isn't as reckless as Anakin is. But he is willing to push himself and put himself in positions that are probably a little over his skis on a more regular basis, similar to Anakin. But he does have a mix. Quinlan does have a mix of Obi-Wan too, because he is able to sit back and think about strategically what's happening. I think part of the challenge with Obi-Wan has always been that he almost undercommits too often. He doesn't commit. Oh, I think you might be muted. He doesn't commit himself often enough. It's like these two characters in the High Republic, Stellan Gios and Elzar Mann. They're kind of that way, whereas Stellan is the guiding light for these two other characters, as they have a different term for him, but he's like their rock, because he's always focused on the Force and doing the right thing and following the rules and all this type of stuff. But when it's time to commit, he will commit and go for it. Whereas Elzar is much more willing to jump in there more often and put himself out there a little too frequently, but he is still highly connected to the Force. So they are different, but I like the parallel here because I think part of the reason why Obi-Wan and Anakin always rubbed against each other and had some challenges is because Obi-Wan is going to err always on the side of the rules, and I err on the side of, let's just wait a little bit more and see what happens. Probably too often, waiting too long. Whereas Anakin is always like, let's just go, do. Ah, crap, I missed something. But continues to repeat that behavior. And so they're not even close to each other in the middle in that regard. They're almost like a neutron star, where they're kind of spinning faster and it's causing them to separate from each other a little further away. They still have the same base as each other, that they believe they have the same base, but their approaches are becoming more and more distant from each other. So I find that really interesting that you brought it up that way. I think it's an interesting way to think about who Obi-Wan is and how that's going to look a decade, 2 decades, whatever it is later in this show. It's going to be very interesting to see what that's like.
Yeah, I always think, I think what makes Obi-Wan actually kind of a dangerous player is he's very patient, and that's his greatest strength, and it's his greatest weakness. His greatest weakness is there were a lot of moments where he could have taken the initiative, and he doesn't. I think Anakin. I don't think we should leave Anakin alone right now. That's taking the initiative. He's his best friend. He could have said that. There was so many different things he could have done. I know that he goes and visits Padme before everything goes crazy on his mission. And he says, hey, was Obi-Wan here? Yeah, Obi-Wan came by because he was worried about you. These are all great things, but Obi-Wan's too patient sometimes, but his patience pays off obviously in other times, spending 20 years on Tatooine. And to that point, I did want to bring up two things for anybody that's listening right now that is thinking, wow, well, I'd like to watch this Kenobi show, this Kenobi character. And last week we talked about how Obi-Wan Kenobi could be the secret villain of this, the Dumbledorian-like villain of Star Wars. The anti-Gandalf, the Saruman, if you will. We talked about that last
His
week.
robe has many flowing colors.
Exactly. Yeah, he's the Obi-Wan of many colors. The thing that for anybody that's listening though and is thinking, wow, I really like this I really like this Kenobi character, I want to get into this show. What is the easiest way for me to get on board? I will say that I've put a lot of thought into this because there are a lot of movies you could watch. There's a lot of different content that you could get into. And I did want to say that in my opinion, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this too, Jeff. In my opinion, if you just watched, and I'd watch it in this order, it's the original Star Wars and Revenge of the Sith. That's it. That's all you really need, and then you should watch it in that order. Not Revenge of the Sith, and then the original Star Wars, which I know I should just start saying A New Hope, but I grew up with it being Star Wars. So watch Star Wars, the 1977 Star Wars, and then watch Revenge of the Sith, because you'll see both sides of that friendship. You'll see the where things are ending, and then you'll see how they got there. And I think that it's a better reveal that way, to be honest. Um, there is some really great lines about their relationship, because it's in Return of the Jedi. If you want to just jump to Return of the Jedi, if you really want some extra credit, you can go and listen to Obi-Wan while he's talking to Luke on Dagobah, and he's got some really great lines, which honestly I could just give them all to you right here. When I first knew him, Anakin was a good friend. But the thing that I would watch for the purposes of getting ready for this show, if you had to sit down and watch two things, watch Star Wars and see a man who is at the end of his rope, the end of his tether, but obviously still has some pieces on the board and is trying to move them in ways that will ultimately redeem not only himself, but potentially save the universe. However terrible the way he's doing it is, manipulating. And then see the other side of it, which is the tragedy of two good friends, of loss. It's Hamlet like. In fact, it's funny because I have Star Wars by William Shakespeare behind me, which is Star Wars translated as if William Shakespeare wrote it, and it's great. It's great. Awesome. I'm an English major, so I loved it. But it's it is Shakespearean Revenge of the Sith, because it is like Hamlet in that Anakin's road becomes bloody, and his friend can't help him, and yeah, it's just incredibly sad, that story, but it only works if you know the context of it first, and then you watch Revenge of the Sith, in my opinion.
I completely agree. When we were talking the last time about, it came up in one of the last two episodes about of this show about the order in which to watch the movies, all nine of the three trilogies, and I had brought up that my preference would be to watch the original trilogy, and then actually watch Force Awakens and Last Jedi. And then if you want to, go back and watch the prequels. And for the same reason, for this reason, I will agree completely with you on your order. Watch Star Wars and then watch Revenge of the Sith. And I'm with you, because you could actually just kind of watch Star Wars. And if you wanted to, you could stop right there and say, who is this? And just really, more than anything else in Star Wars, pay the closest amount of attention to the scene from the point that Luke meets Obi-Wan for the first time, Old Ben, when he saves him from the Tusken Raiders, specifically over to his house and that interaction within his house before they leave to go off and do the next part of their hero's journey. While they're in his house, pay attention to that scene, because everything that is said in there is almost the basis for basically everything that we know about Star Wars at this point. Like every story thread you can think of, from the Clone Wars to Rebels to all these different things, in some way is mentioned in something that Alec Guinness says in that scene, that you could then say, oh, that's where the Clone Wars started. Or that's where the Clone Wars idea came from, or that's where this other thing came from, or this is what the Force is, or wow, who are the Jedi? This is where that started. Like the High Republic now, like has its origins in that scene right there. And then if you want to, I'm with you. Beyond that, if you want to learn a bit more about, but why does he feel this way, the way he does, the way he's saying things now? You watch Revenge of the Sith, and to your point, you will then gain a much greater understanding of how he got to become that Obi-Wan later on. I will add one additional piece to all of this. That is, I love the animated shows. I adore animated in general, but specifically for Star Wars, I love it. Resistance, I never got into. I've mentioned that on the show before, but I know that it does its story magic, and that's good. The reason I love the animated is there's so much more that can be done in the stories visually than you could do with actors for the type of money they spend. And specifically the episode my notes here, Star Wars Rebels Season 3, Episode 20 is called Twin Sons. And it's an episode... hold on. Where is it? I got it. There it is. Just sorry if you haven't watched Rebels yet. I apologize. In that episode, you see Obi-Wan for the first time in forever on Tatooine, and he battles Maul. Not Darth Maul. Maul just goes by Maul now. He battles Maul in a final confrontation between the two of them. I absolutely love it for a host of reasons for a different show. But the main one in this context is that, to me, you get to see between Revenge of the Sith and a Star Wars or Episode 4, between those two things, you get to see almost like this high of highs, so to speak, for Obi-Wan in his arc. When he comes out of Revenge of the Sith and he realizes this is a thing he has to do, but he still doesn't really get it. And when he gets to Tatooine and delivers Luke to Owen and Beru and then leaves, he has his hood on, and he's still kind of, his cowl is up, and he's still kind of like quiet contemplation, rubbing his beard. Like, he's still trying to wrap his head around what is happening here. How did this come about? And then in Rebels, when you see this episode, you see an Obi-Wan who's not resigned, because we've talked about this before, who's not resigned to his face. You see an Obi-Wan who is fully committed to what he is doing. Like, he is not powerful. He is mentally strong and fit, and he knows exactly what he's doing and exactly the reasons he's doing it. And the reason I love that is for its own sake. And also, then when you put it in context with Star Wars and you watch him in his house talking to Luke, and you see the look and the vibe of Alec Guinness's portrayal of him at that point, you're like, how did I go from Revenge of the Sith in this determination of this character and then to this character? I don't want to see back down, but to this other character who's almost now into sort of a resigned fate, hermit-like state. There's a peak that's in the middle between those two things, and I think that's really fascinating to watch. So I'm with you. Watch A New Hope, then watch Revenge of the Sith. But then if you have 25 minutes, go fill that in with one episode of Rebels. It's Twin Suns, Season 3, Episode 20. Watch that, and I would love to hear what people think. And if you've watched it already, just if you've consumed anything that we've said tonight, please put it in the comments. I know Rich is here. I think Joanne is here. Some other folks might be here too. We'd love to hear from you. What thing are you planning to watch, to read, to consume between now and next week's premiere to get ready for, get yourself kind of prepped, excited, mentally prepped, whatever it is for Kenobi next week? We'd love to hear it. Put it in the chat. We would love to hear it from you.
Oh, and I'll add this too for anybody who's watching the show right now. If you're and you can do this live, we'll actually check comics afterwards too. If you've got a question about the character as well, like, we're more than happy to kind of talk this out. I will say that, and we talked about this a couple episodes ago, that a thing that I found out, and again, I don't know if this is true, but I keep seeing it everywhere, is a thing that I found out that is the original script for Episode 1. Obi-Wan was the mentor, and Qui-Gon was the apprentice.
Oh yeah, you did mention that.
Yeah, and I loved this idea that the big switch at the end was that Liam Neeson was hired to be Obi-Wan, the older mentor, and Ewan McGregor was hired to be Qui-Gon, the young apprentice. And this is also one of the reasons why, by the way, if anybody's ever watched Episode 1, you'll notice Qui-Gon doesn't get a first name until he's on Tatooine in Anakin's house. I mean, it's like an hour and 15 minutes into the movie, and one of your main characters finally gets named. It's terrible, but it stems from a bigger issue, which is Liam Neeson was originally going to play Obi-Wan, and when he dies, I'm not spoiling a movie that is now 20 years old. He doesn't make it, everybody. Qui-Gon's not around. So Qui-Gon, when Qui-Gon dies, exactly. When Qui-Gon dies, by the way, they spoiled that movie on the album for the when the soundtrack came out for Episode 1. On the back, it says the death of Qui-Gon. There's a song called The Death of Qui-Gon. And my friend Chris Noyes saw that before we went into the movies, and it was rough. And so Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Liam Neeson's playing Obi-Wan, Ewan McGregor's playing Qui-Gon. Liam Neeson dies, and then the character that's played with Qui-Gon, the character being played by Ewan McGregor, says, I'm going to be Obi-Wan now. I'm going to take your name as an honor of you for saving my life. And that is the big switcheroo that happens in the movie, that this character that you've been following the whole time, you're like, oh, this is Liam Neeson. Obviously, he's playing a young Alec Guinness. And no, he's not. It's not Liam Neeson.
Interesting.
It's in fact Ewan McGregor who's playing the young Alec Guinness. And that was going to be the big switcheroo. And you weren't going to be ready for it. But they had they were worried they had done too many reveals, because they were going to be like, haha, Queen Amidala is in fact Padme. Padme is in fact Queen Amidala. Boom, boom, boom. That to me was the lesser of the two reveals. I would have much rather had whenever you're doing a prequel, it's got to feel old but new again. And this would have been a great way to feel old but new again, which is to have a complexity like that, to mess with the audience's expectations, which is, obviously Liam Neeson, that's the guy who's going to be Alec Guinness later. Nope. Mm-hmm. It's this young kid.
Oh,
that's the character, and I like even the characterization of Obi-Wan, even by Ewan McGregor all the way back there in Episode 1. Again, it's they were very careful in how they were building that character, even then, as bad as Episode 1 might be, and I don't think it's that bad, but as bad as people think it is, it's a lot of really good characterization moments in there for Obi-Wan.
Yeah, I totally agree. So since we're coming to the end, some honorable mentions. I've been trying to capture all of these in some browser tabs, so I'll put them into our description afterwards. I just started reading this series, book 2. I don't actually know when it's coming out, but this is a brand new Obi-Wan series that Star Wars has been publishing. Marvel has been publishing. This is episode 1 or issue number 1. Wow, I can't use the right words tonight. But it's amazing because it starts off with Obi-Wan, very much Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan. And if I can do this without not being able to see the screen, there's very much like disheveled. Oh, sorry, hold on. There it is. Disheveled, like Alec Guinness's Obi-Wan right there. And he starts journaling about what he's doing on Tatooine and why. But he starts journaling. He's like, I've got nothing but time, so I might as well take some time to journal. A sandstorm is coming. I'm going to be indoors for a while. And he starts journaling. The first thing he starts journaling, which they detail out in the rest of this book, is Obi-Wan as a kid on Coruscant. With a friend of his who is trying to make a decision. And so they kind of go off on their own. They leave the temple for a little bit to go do something. And what's interesting, actually, I didn't even realize it until I sat down tonight, is if you see the picture here of Obi-Wan, and then I think they might have used the same artwork. I'm not entirely sure, but even though it's a legend, one's legend, one's not. I think they just pulled back some old artwork to do. But anyway, it's a really good book. If you haven't picked it up, go find a local comic book shop, pick up this copy. I don't know how many will be in the series or the run, or even when the next one comes out. But issue number 2 may be out already. I have to go check my pull list. But it's really good because it starts to set the stage for you of like who Obi-Wan actually is. Like various points in his life as a kid, seeing him now as Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan, but then as a kid. So I'm assuming that we're going to see more of these come out and more subtle points about his life over time and what made him who he is today. But things like that I think are amazing. The other book that I'd highly recommend if anyone's not read it yet is Master and Apprentice, story of Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon together. And the two of them, here, I'll do it one more time. Spoiler warning. Sorry, everybody. The story basically centers around the two, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, struggling to be a master and apprentice. They're struggling to work with each other and all these things. And then Qui-Gon is offered a seat on the Jedi Council. But the bad part is somebody else tells Obi-Wan before Qui-Gon can. And you can imagine what it's like to have your parent figure or someone else. If you're about to learn your parent's going to bounce on you and take off, but they didn't tell you, someone else tells you and they're standing next to you, it's like the worst possible thing that can happen in a relationship. So it's a great read because by the end of it, it sets the stage for who they are when we see the Phantom Menace. But it's a fascinating read because it really does give you a better idea of the relationship between the two of them, which develops out who Obi-Wan is. Oh, and also, if you want to better understand why Obi-Wan makes all his smart-ass comments about flying is for droids and all that type of stuff, you need to read this book because it'll tell you exactly why he makes those comments. Like literally, this book explains to you exactly why he hates flying.
I like
there
that.
You go.
I like that
yeah,
a lot.
it's fast. That's a subtle story element, but it's definitely something that gets tied off. So.
Well, I like that you brought up your honorable mentions. I've got another comic book that I will also bring up, which is the Anakin and Obi-Wan comic book, which is a young Anakin and a younger Obi-Wan that are sent on a mission, and the two of them come to they are at odds. And it is a really great story, and it also deals with the ramifications of Obi-Wan is like in his early 20s, and Anakin's like he's in his mid to late 20s, and Anakin's like almost a teenager. This is problematic because, and by the way, like, come on, Jedi, like, you guys need to have like a better HR system. This is rough because he's trying, like, come on. They have no escalation path here. Anakin and Obi-Wan are having their disputes. Obi-Wan's never really been a master to a kid who's coming of age, and like kind of trying to find his way and
and with all the pressures of you're the chosen one.
Yeah,
actively
exactly.
Talked about all of the time.
Yeah, exactly. Like, could you imagine? It's like Harry Potter-esque. You're the boy who lived. Yeah, you better be good at Quidditch. That's like what is happening in this comic book, and I really like it, and I like how they come to they are at odds. And then through the course of the story, your characters change, they learn. So that's really great. And then there's one really crazy thing that everyone can watch right now, and I think it's a great, awesome, perfect primer for the show. And it is a 4-minute video on YouTube. It's a fan film that came out in 2018. All you got to do is go to YouTube and type in Kenobi fan film. And it is a guy that looks almost exactly like Ewan McGregor. And it's about a young Obi-Wan. It's a slightly older Obi-Wan being on Tatooine, watching Luke, but dealing with the demons of his past. And it is great. It's high production value for a fan film. There's stormtroopers, there's drama, there's danger. It's awesome. And it's 4 minutes long. And if the Disney Kenobi show is 1% as good as this fan film from 2018, we're in for a really great ride. Mm-hmm. So if you want a 4-minute primer on what this show is going to be like, check out that fan film, Kenobi 2018 fan film on YouTube.
There we go. I don't think we can do any better than that tonight. Well, listen, everyone, thanks for being here. The road to Kenobi is almost over. The premiere is next week. It's going to be awesome. I'm taking the next day off because, science. We gave you a list, I think a pretty good list tonight of stuff. There's obviously so much more you can go consume, and the list is huge. Like almost the entire, basically all of Star Wars: The Clone Wars is Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin. Like, it's not all of it, but for the most part it is. But there's everything you could watch. But I think this is a good list for you to go dip your toes into the water of who is this person, who's this character, how did we get here, what might we expect to see, or at least be inspired by the producers, the directors, everybody have been inspired by when they created the series. And I'm really excited that this is going to be a point in time. They're not going to do, we'll bring him back for another run. No, we don't need that. Like, everybody might want it, but as you have said many times before, Ryan, it is okay for a story to end where the story needs to end, even if everybody wants to hear more about it. Stories have to end where they make sense to end. And it's not that Kenobi's story is over, but the story they're telling next week, I think we might be able to learn more. But that's what, honestly, I think that's what these are for. And that's what, actually not even these. I think, honestly, that's what these are for. Like, these little points in time hits of stories, like what we're going to see next week, is a more extended version of what might be told in one of these, in a comic book. And I think, honestly, you can go find Kenobi comic books left and right and read them, and you'll learn the same sorts of things that we're going to see next week. We're just going to see more detail and more action around it.
Yeah, otherwise you're going to get season 2 of Picard, and that was devastating. What happened to that character? He meant so much. Now I don't know where that show is going to go now. It's like the Jurassic Park movies. you gotta know when you gotta know when the story's over.
Yeah.
And
Do you think they jumped the shark a little bit in season 2?
oh man, I mean,
Okay, another show?
I don't
Is that
even-
another show?
Yeah, that's another. Yeah, man, that's another show because I gotta say what I'm excited about, and I hope everybody's gonna be able to tune in next week because we're gonna be watching the show every single week, and we're gonna be able to give everybody kind of again our read of the episode.
Yep.
We're gonna come in with notes. We're gonna come in with our reads, just like we did with Book of Boba Fett. So we're really excited to mix it up on this. But oh my gosh, has Star Wars made good moves where Star Trek outside of Strange New Worlds? Everybody, please watch Strange New Worlds. It's amazing. But man, that Picard show, you got to know when a character's at the end of the line. There's a great Star Trek episode, and it's titled "All Good Things," and that's I think a good lesson to learn is that all good things, they have to come to an end, just like this episode. So.
Yep, absolutely. Well, listen, everyone, thank you so much for being here. If you're catching this on the replay, thanks to everyone who's here on the replay. We appreciate it. Leave your comments. If you've got other things you want to suggest to anyone, put them out there. I may put up in a couple more TikToks. Well, I'm definitely going to put more up over the next week around this, and I think might even do a little series about things people can go watch. So I'll feed off of the show, get it out there. Otherwise, everyone, have a wonderful night, and we will catch you on this show next week.
Hey, bye, everybody.
Cheers.